What I have to say is a lot more to do with all of you learning about making the grade report, but I'd like to also have you reflect. So you might feel like it's a little slow, so do bear with me. So when Parmesh asked me to speak and said, you know, you have to talk about reimagine the community, do you start my slideshow or I start? I thought to myself, you know, what does reimagine actually mean? And so then I started to get a little bit confused because I thought to reimagine assumes that you've actually imagined, and for you to have imagined, you need to actually be aware of kind of what's really going on. And so what I thought I would do is spend most of my time trying to tell you what's actually going on in Bombay's public schools to give you a basis to be able to imagine. And the reason that I do this is what Dasra bases itself on is actually trying to bring knowledge and information to people who are in a position to be influencing it. And so I look at all of you as influencers of social change, and here specifically I'd like you all to think about how and what is your role in changing public school in Bombay. So what I'm going to do initially first is walk you through and try for you to just imagine for a moment the kinds of people who send their children to public schools. I'm sure most of you actually probably went to, and probably in fact went to private schools in the country. And if you're parents, you send your children to private schools. But you know, who are the people in our community, or who are the people in Bombay who are sending their children to public schools? We have contract laborers, and what I want you to do is look at each slide and really try and think about the kinds of lives that they're living. How are they trying to make ends meet? And perhaps what are their aspirations and dreams of their children? So we have contract laborers, we have rickshaw workers and taxi drivers. We have coolies in the railway stations. We have dhobiwalas that wash some of your clothes. We have the darzi who stitches our clothes. We have plastic recyclers who sort out through your garbage. And we have construction laborers who are building all of the buildings in the city. And then we have those places like Kamatipura, where perhaps some of you have visited or some of you haven't. But within these kinds of places, there are all kinds of people who send their children to public schools. We have children of sex workers, we have the shopkeepers there, and we have different kinds of laborers there as well. And so this collage is really actually sending 60% of the children who attend school, ends up being around 600,000 students in Bombay that are actually using the public education system. And so it's quite a mammoth of a system, and it's a public system because it's quite large. But I also wanted to give you a flavor that it is quite big, and the municipality, or the MCGM, is the organization that is supporting this and responsible for it. Just to throw out some facts, and I wanted to let you know that I don't want to too many statistics, but there's a report for you to pick up that has a lot more statistics that can help you kind of understand. But just some really key things that I'd like you to remember, hopefully, is the MCGM only spends 8% of the city's budget on education. And of that total, 96% is going to those 16,000 teachers, which actually only leaves 4% of the total budget to really try and apply it to anything innovative or anything really beyond just teaching. And it's so, the system's pretty much crippled, and it's quite a mess. And if you look at learning levels, which are really some key things that we try to look at as if an education system is working, we see that only 50% of the children can read and write or cannot read and write. And that's really, really abysmal. It's a large portion of the city that perhaps you don't see, but is really a big piece of the system. And so I'm going to shift a little bit to, you know, what has been the role of nonprofits or NGOs in this, because what Dasra does is, through these research reports, we try and identify organizations that we think are doing very innovative work and hope that people would like to fund them or support them in some way or other. And so I'm just going to try and walk you through sort of what has been the role of nonprofits, because I think sometimes we discount them a lot and say, you know, they're no good, they're a waste of money, or they're a waste of time, and this is really the role of the government. Why are NGOs playing this role? And if you go back to the 1970s, this is what we call in the report the independence era. It is where you had the state and you had the NGOs, and the NGOs were largely running things that were outside of the school system. This is where a lot of work started with non-formal education centers and bridging centers, and the whole point was to try to get kids to actually go to school. It was less about sort of the quality of education. The next era, kind of in the 80s, was what we called the leading era. This is where education actually finally entered the agenda of the state, and you saw that 70% of NGOs in the city were somehow or the other involved in education. And so there started to be some sort of bridging between what the NGOs were doing and the state schools. The next era really is where a lot of innovation has happened, and this is what we call the sharing era in the 90s, where for some of you would, I'm sure, have heard of Akanksha, doorstep schools, Pratham, some really innovative models started to come out, and this is where you saw the NGO really playing a critical role in the school system. And in the 2000s, what we're calling now really is systemic change. And in the report, we talk a little bit about the school excellence program with the municipality has brought out, but it's really exciting because this is where the government and the state has actually brought in NGOs on a very formal basis and have them really working with the system. So it's quite exciting. There are a number of organizations that are involved in this movement, and I wanted to just highlight that there has been a lot of change and improvement to the extent that 97% of children in Bombay actually attend school. So attendance really isn't the problem as much as the learning levels that I had shared with you sort of earlier. Now, there's a few things that I'd like to leave you with, and it's really talking about, which we highlight in the report, sort of what are the cornerstones of the quality of education and how do you improve the quality. And so all of you who are in a position to influence, I'm very keen that you leave here remembering these sort of cornerstones. The number one most high impact area, if we could invest in, is headmasters, in terms of being able, them to be able to manage the schools better, but also for them to be able to balance the quality of education that's happening in the school. The second most critical cornerstone in improving the quality of education is teachers. Seems obvious, but it's critical to the extent that these teachers who do actually come to school are challenged by how to teach the children that are actually coming in at various levels and various skills. And the third cornerstone is curriculum and pedagogy. An easier way to say it is how to teach what you teach. And this is also critical when you look at the current curriculum. The whole school system was actually built around the Industrial Revolution. And if you look at the kinds of jobs and the opportunities out there, they're actually drastically different than what the school system prepares these children for. And so really that's kind of the context that I want to leave you with, to give you kind of a basis for you to be able to imagine and for you to really think about what is your role in this community of public education. And then as you develop your own individual role, you can think about what the role is of a community, because I think jumping straight to the community is a bit too aggressive. And so I want to leave you something with a little bit practical and suggest that there's three things I think we can work towards as individuals as we try and reimagine a community that wants to improve public education. And these three things perhaps are applicable to most things, which is start being exposed. Start looking at things differently. I don't know how many of you had seen those laborers or those other kinds of individuals in the city. Start thinking about the kinds of lives that they live. So be exposed. Second thing is start caring. We live in this city, so much happens, you actually become immune to it, almost dull. Start caring. If you think about the lives that they live, you will automatically start thinking about things perhaps you can do. And the third thing is action, or amplify your voice and speak out. If it means talking at a dinner party and informing someone a little more, to volunteering in the week, or to deciding you'd like to contribute some money, take action. This is actually really important, and it's a big piece of why I created Dasra, was to create an organization that could help others take action. So for example, an outcome of making the grade report was a giving circle, where we were very excited to invite 10 philanthropists who willingly wanted to commit to improving public education. And we ended up funding an organization called Muktangan, who is really creating a revolutionary teacher education program where they're going to bring women from the slum communities and we're going to support them in being able to give them accredited diplomas so that these government-approved teachers can then sort of be in the school system. I'm going to show you a video, and it's not related directly to the report, but it's kind of the starting point of these three things, of being exposed, starting to care, and taking action. And so I'd like you to look at this video and just think about it. And so this was actually an organization called, an organization called Educate Girls, which works with girls in rural Rajasthan to try to make schools more girl-friendly and bring them into the school system. And we actually had a report out before making the grade that was called Girl Power. And if there's anything I would like to, you to leave with is to be aware that if you invest in girls' education, it actually transforms a number of development factors. So, I guess just to end with is, as we think about education and as we think about schools and perhaps sort of your role, I think it's critical that you sort of change your mind from saying, these are not my schools, this is not my city, or these are their schools, to start thinking about, these are our schools and this is our city. Because that's how you're going to reimagine your role, and then you can reimagine your role in the community. And I'm going to leave you with a quote that I think is actually quite nice. And as I read it to you, if you can imagine or close your eyes yourself, this little child. Let us think of education as the means of developing our greatest abilities, because in each of us there is a private hope and dream, which fulfilled can be translated into benefit for everyone and greater strength of the nation. So let's together reimagine.